How do you build muscle and strength at the same time? A lot of people in the bodybuilding and fitness community, they call this power building. That generally revolves around using the big three lifts, the bench, the squat, and the deadlift, training in powerlifting fashion, but with higher volumes to produce more muscle and more size to the lifter. And in my experience and what I've seen over the years is this method of training, it generally produces more of a powerlifting physique, although one with possibly a bit more muscle mass than the average lifter. And what I mean by powerlifter physique is someone with a thick back, large legs, hips, and pecs. Lots of muscle mass, but you rarely ever see a powerlifter with the same aesthetics as a bodybuilder. Now, contrast that with bodybuilders of the 60s and 70s. We're talking about physiques that were arguably the most aesthetic in all of bodybuilding history, even rivaling today's bodybuilders, who are much larger in comparison. But even with such aesthetic physiques, V-tapers, tiny waist, large arms, these bodybuilders were brutally strong. Reg Park was known for being able to bench press 500 pounds and do behind the neck presses with 315. Tom Platz squatting over 520 pounds for over 20 repetitions. And Franco Columbu doing reps on deadlift with over 700 pounds. Numbers that could rival any strength-specific lifter. In fact, back then, most of these bodybuilders, when they were prepared to get on stage and pose, they would also compete in powerlifting and weightlifting events, sometimes even at the same contest. So how did they get so strong and also build such impressive physiques? Isn't there a strength-specific way to train and a hypertrophy-specific way of training? Or can you do both? Let's talk a bit more about how these bodybuilders actually trained in order to answer that question. The 70s bodybuilding era was known for its high volume and high frequency training style, hitting body parts 2 to 3 times per week. This style of training causes significant improvements in muscle mass, which is clearly evident in their physiques. But what it also does is improve your skill for lifting. Strength itself is a skill. The strongest bench pressers in the world are very strong, but they're also highly skilled at bench pressing. The fastest way to improve any skill is to practice it more often. And some of the strongest lifters in the world, they built their strength by practicing their specific lifts very often. Olympic weightlifters practice squatting almost every day, sometimes multiple times per day. This high frequency of training, it builds much more strength-specific skill than the traditional one body part, one lift per week training today. But what else did bodybuilders do in the 60s and 70s? Lots of sets. This high volume approach also builds that strength development by now not only practicing it frequently, but multiple times each time you lift. This high volume approach and multiple set training also increases neurological adaptations, where you can also get stronger, not just through increases in muscle mass, but by your nervous system actually becoming much more efficient at lifting. So naturally, due to bodybuilders back then practicing a lift over and over again, training it with multiple sets and multiple reps, they built extreme levels of strength. That makes sense as to why they got so strong. And lifters who are purely focused on strength today don't have the same aesthetics. The bodybuilders back then focused on each individual muscle group for full development of the physique. The high volume, high frequency approach that they used to build the chest, the back, and the legs, it got them massive amounts of muscle, but it also built them significant levels of strength. But they didn't stop there just with those muscle groups. They added in additional volume to train the side and the rear heads of the delts. They focused on the biceps, the triceps, and the forearms, the lats, the calves, and the abs. This style of training was primarily used to build muscle mass, but the fact that they did it so often with such high volume and such high frequencies was the reason that they built such impressive physiques that were also extremely strong. But in my opinion, where people get this power building method wrong today is that they believe a stronger bench, squat, and deadlift is what will enhance your physique. And in my experience of over 20 years of lifting and coaching, and if we look back at the history of bodybuilding, it's really the guys who have massive overhead presses, are able to do pull-ups with an additional 50 to 100 pounds, can dumbbell press, barbell row, Romanian deadlift, and dip with massive amounts of weight. Those are the guys who are not only brutally strong, but also have extremely impressive physiques. And by the way, the guys who are able to lift extremely heavy on these lifts, they also happen to be very strong on the big three. Now, if you're somebody that just wants more muscle mass and couldn't care how strong you are, you can focus a bit more on isolation movements and more body part specific training. But if you want to build mass and build strength and achieve that complete size and strength physique from your training, like the bodybuilders did back in the 60s and 70s, you're going to want to train these mass building specific exercises with sufficient volume and frequency, while training all the other aesthetic muscles in proportion. And that's exactly the style of training I put together in my newest program, the old school strength and size training system. It's a 5-day per week program focusing on the key movements to develop both size and strength using higher volumes and higher frequencies. And it should be used by guys looking to get both stronger and bigger using basic old school bodybuilding and strength methods. This program is available now in app form, so you can keep track of your workouts on your phone, plug your weights in each week, track your performance, and there's also a private community where you can interact with others running the same program. And you can get access to the old school strength and size system by following the link down below in the description. Or if you have the Boost Camp mobile app, you can search for the old school strength and size program, and you can get access to it right now. And if you want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to hit subscribe.